Good morning, everyone, and thank you for your presence today in this cavernous space. So I welcome any of you who want to come forward because we want to generate a good discussion after our presentations, and we welcome a more interactive space. But as you can see, there are microphones set up along the aisles, and so when it comes time to open to the floor, you're welcome to use those as well. It's my absolute pleasure to welcome you to this bridging session, Stepping Up the Pace Together, Dynamic Partnerships Between Communities, Academic, and Policy Sectors. My name is Catherine Lapani. I'm an anthropologist based at the Australian National University in Canberra, and I have close ties to Papua New Guinea, where I have been involved in HIV work since the mid-1990s. And I must say it's my absolute pleasure to see such a strong representation of Papua New Guineans here at the International Conference in Melbourne, as delegates and presenters and as volunteers. And I'm happy to see some of you out in the audience as well. And of course, we'll be hearing about Papua New Guinea from one of our presenters. My own ethnographic research has been in the Trobriand Islands of Papua New Guinea. And I look at the community context of responding to HIV, focusing on cultural knowledge, values, and practices around gender and sexuality. But I was also involved in developing Papua New Guinea's first multi-sectoral strategy for responding to HIV in the mid-1990s. And this was a highly consultative, participatory process that recognized that HIV is not simply a public health issue, but requires a broad-based, collective, and inclusive approach where the critical element is building relationships to sustain the program. Well, our structure for the session today will involve three presentations by our guest speakers. We'll be hearing first from from David Ho about the Ontario HIV Treatment Network. And then we'll hear from Helen Isles about the PopArt study in Zambia. And finally from Kevin Miles, who will speak about the Oil Search Health Foundation in Papua New Guinea. I'll introduce each of them before they present, and they'll speak for about 10 minutes each, talking about their organizations and activities and focusing specifically on the partnership aspect of their work. And then we'll open it up to a roundtable discussion and invite additional panelists to join in this discussion, asking them for their reflections, their observations and comments, and then engaging in a dialogue. And then we want to also engage you in an interactive, dynamic discussion and dialogue. And that will be for about 15 minutes at the end of the session. I'd like to take this opportunity to open up by briefly reflecting on what we mean by dynamic. I mean, this is a highly qualitative word that we use often to describe our work. It's a process characterized by change and engaged, responsive action. And of course, we know that HIV is constantly changing. HIV is highly dynamic, and it unfolds in multiple epidemics in interaction with diverse social, cultural, political, economic factors. Dynamic is also about presence, about energetic, bold, vital, and a positive attitude in taking action. And I think there's also an importance to put this into historical context. It's part of our rhetoric now, dynamic partnerships, but it is not a new concept. It has been with us since the beginning of responding to the epidemic. And I think it's fitting to acknowledge the observation made by Professor Sharon Lewin in the opening ceremony on Sunday night that partnerships were the critical factor in Australia's early and sustained successful response to HIV, inspired and led by the communities directly affected. And in this respect, I think we have to keep foremost in our discussion and in our minds that the foundational and fundamental partnership is with people living with HIV. So with those opening remarks, I'm delighted now to invite Daniel Ho to the podium to make his presentation about the Ontario HIV Treatment Network. Daniel Ho is the president of the... David, I'm sorry, David.
It's all right.
Terribly sorry.
My mother thought differently.
David Ho is the president of the Ontario HIV Network. He's lived with HIV for 30 years, is a long-standing HIV and gay community advocate, a past senior policy advisor on HIV with the Government of Canada, and past member of the Ontario Minister of Health's Advisory Committee on HIV.